Is it recording now?
One must not get one's knickers in a twist.
I'm trying.
These are the stories your granny never told.
Clint Eastwood loved my apple pie. I was raising a cow and 50 sheep and 2 children.
I slipped upon some spilled onions on the road and crashed my motorbike.
Okay, we're recording. So you can tell me your name and, if you want, your age.
Okay, my name is Edna. I was born Edna Diana Stoll, but my name now is Edna Oling.
Okay. And you live in Queens?
I live in Queens
And you've lived here
since 1970.
1970.
Yes,
Were you born here?
I was born in Brooklyn.
So do you have any stories that come to mind that you want to tell already?
You mean about being born?
About anything in your life, or I can ask you about some of your beautiful collection that you have in your house.
Okay, let's see. I'll go back to my father's father. My father was born in New York City at Hester Street. My grandfather was born in Europe, not quite sure where, because it was the Austrian-Hungarian Empire in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to America in the 1800s.
Wow.
And was a peddler at first in Manhattan, and eventually had a store business selling paper goods, which were basically the kind of rolls of paper 5-6 feet high that were used by garment manufacturers in the garment industry and the fur industry. So as you know, the fur industry is practically dead.
Yeah.
And when I started teaching in the 1950s, we said that New York City was the center of the garment industry. Ain't true anymore.
Yeah.
It also was the biggest port in New York, and head of the publishing companies. All these things have changed.
Yeah. So you're a teacher?
I was a teacher. I was born in 1930, which is the year before the Empire State Building was completed.
Wow.
And I think the Chrysler Building was completed that year.
So you're older than the Empire
Right.
State and the Chrysler Building. That's pretty
Right.
monumental.
So, on the other hand, my father was born in 1899, so he was born before there were cars, before
Wow.
the Wright brothers flew the first plane, before there was electricity. Their house had gas lighting in it. That's why I said I'm starting there. So,
Yeah.
my father was born at the turn of the century. He actually went into the army but in 1917, but the war ended before he ever went anywhere.
Lucky.
So that was that thing. But this is a greedy story. My grandfather built a house in Borough Park, which was a Jewish-Italian neighborhood then. Now it's an Orthodox Jewish neighborhood, mostly Hasidim. And he built a house for $5,000, two-family house with porches, and we lived upstairs. My grandparents lived upstairs. They had a big covered porch, a living room, a library, a dining room,
Wow.
2 bedrooms, a
For
bathroom, and a kitchen.
$5,000.
Right, for $5,000. And upstairs there were 4 huge rooms and sinks, not a toilet, but sinks.
Okay.
That's in the attic. So in 1970, when my father was 71, he was getting so many tickets because he wasn't cleaning the sidewalk. He couldn't do it. He sold the house to a rabbi. He was offered $60,000 for the house.
Oh my God.
And he didn't want to sell because they wanted to tear it down. So he sold it to a rabbi for $45,000 with 10 children. 3 years later, the rabbi sold it for nearly $1 million.
Yeah, in New York. Wow.
And 3 houses were put up on the lot. And my father made $45,000. The rabbi made God knows what. So, I mean, you have to laugh at these things. So my father was not a good businessman.
Well, it's New
He never
York,
got
right?
rich, huh?
You never know.
Never know. But my father was an Orthodox Jew. My grandfather was an Orthodox Jew. And when I was maybe 12, 13, my cousin Louis was 6 months younger than I. We had to make a speech in Hebrew at Yeshiva University congratulating my grandfather on his 80th birthday. It was Louis to this day hated making that speech, and I sort of don't remember any of it either.
So you speak Hebrew? Or you learned it at the time for
Let
the
me put it
speech?
this way. in the 1920s, my grandfather was in a movement to make Hebrew a modern language.
Oh.
And I think the movement was called the Chavrusa. So people would say to me, do you know Yiddish? And I say no, because my grandfather did not speak Yiddish. He spoke Hebrew at home. So when I was 6 years old or younger, I learned Hebrew, which I don't know today. I can say certain things, but when I talk to the people from Israel, I am talking an antique language.
Okay, is that the difference between Hebrew and Yiddish? I personally don't.
First of all, those of us who came from Central Europe were Ashkenazis. Those who came from the Mediterranean were Sephardim. And the Hebrew of today is a modern language that's changing.
Okay.
So let's say I said a word, I would say madu or why. You don't say that today. In other words, words that I say are antique now.
Okay, I can see
like
that.
in English.
Like in English, yeah.
Right.
Or
So-
as young people, we have our whole
Right,
new
right.
vocabulary now
So
with
there's a whole-
podcasts.
So I don't know the vocabulary of today. I know the grammar. I could, Ani Yalda, I'm a little girl. But I'm not saying it with the accent that they do. They
Okay.
say, I would say atur, they would say at. I would say Shabbos, they would say Shabbat.
Okay, so
So-
it's slightly different.
It's slightly
And then
different, and they
Yiddish?
speak too fast.
But so that's Hebrew, and then Yiddish is an older language, or?
Hebrew is a very old language. Yiddish is basically using the Hebrew alphabet and using a German basis. So people who speak
Okay.
Yiddish very often can understand High German,
Yeah.
but not all of them can.
I think I've heard some Yiddish, and then speaking German, have understood some words, and was really
Right.
surprised that
Now,
I knew.
my friend was a Sephardic Jew. Her grandmother and mother were born in Turkey. But they originally had come from Spain to Turkey, and they spoke Ladino, which you never hear anything about.
Never heard
Ladino
of it.
uses the Hebrew alphabet with Spanish words as the basis rather than
Oh.
German words.
Wow, I had no idea. That's
Yeah, so
fascinating.
things like that.
When you were a teacher, did you teach about these things, or?
Did I speak about these things as a teacher? Absolutely not. I'm teaching social studies.
Oh, I didn't know. Oh, so- okay, so
in a
you
New
were
York City public school.
to what age?
Junior high school and high school. I started out teaching in high school. Oh, this part I don't really want to talk about. All right, I'll talk
we can
about
skip it. if you want.
Way back in 1952, when I took the exam for a teacher, they only were offering substitute exams. They weren't offering regular exams. So I became a substitute teacher in the high schools. And my favorite story is I started out going to an elementary school that was a yeshiva for girls. So I went to an all-girls elementary school. Then I went to Hunter High School, all girls. Then I went to Hunter College, which was all girls, when I graduated in 1952. And my first job as a substitute was at Chelsea Vocational High School, which was all boys. So I walk in, and the assistant principal says to me, "You have a math class." I said, "I don't know math. I'm a social studies teacher, English, history, not math." He says, "Don't worry about it. All they're doing is adding inches and feet and yards. And when you get to 13 inches, you're supposed to transfer it to 1 foot, 1 inch. If you get to 4 feet, you're supposed to make it 1 yard, 1 foot." Okay. He says, "Have them put the homework on the board and correct it." So the kids put the homework on the board, and I'm looking at it. They're all wrong. Everybody's wrong. So finally, in desperation, I say, "Does anyone in the class have a 12-inch ruler on them?" And from the back of the room comes, "Everyone has a 12-inch ruler but the teacher."
Because it was an
So that was my first job teaching in an all-boys school.
Oh, just diving straight into it.
that was. I taught in high school for 6 years. Then I got my regular license. But in those days, to get a regular license, you had to take a teaching test. Mm-hmm. You had to pass an oral test, so you didn't have a lisp.
Oh, really?
And then the last part of it all, you had to pass a physical. And the physical said you had to weigh and I weighed So they gave me a period of time to come back.
Wow.
And now I weighed minus. But I wasn't minus enough.
Okay.
So they told me that I couldn't get a license for the high school, only for the junior high school.
So you couldn't teach because you were a certain weight and that wasn't allowed?
That was finally broken about 15 years later.
Well, I'd hope so.
Court. But at that time, it was not broken.
Why?
Who the hell knows? That shows you I can curse. Anyway, so I went to a junior high school, and that was like, compared to teaching in a high school, it was...
Were the kids just terrible?
This is the days of, the gang fights. Mm-hmm. Okay, in those days, I learned what a zip gun was, how to make a zip gun. Hello?
I don't even know what that is.
Okay, the kids would make a wooden gun shape, and they made a groove in it. And when the teachers parked outside the school, you took your aerial, which was a separate aerial, and you unscrewed it and put it in your car.
The antenna?
The antenna. No, I meant the antenna.
Antenna, okay.
I said aerial. Antenna.
Which we don't have anymore, but...
Right. Yeah, and then they took the antenna and they put into the groove that they made in the pistol.
They'd shoot you with car antennas?
Yes, darling. And they had a bullet.
Oh, no. Did you get hit by one?
No.
Oh, good.
But they were making it for their enemies, the other gangs, like West Side Story. That concept, that I lived through that. You're supposed to walk your class to the street, so you'd look out the window and you'd see the gang waiting with the garbage can covers, ready to hit somebody.
Oh.
Well, it was fun in those days.
It was fun. Okay.
There were gang wars.
Wow.
And in fact, sometimes you wanted to take a class on a trip, and the subway took you into one territory, so certain kids would not go.
They wouldn't go in the subway.
Because they were afraid of...
Because they're afraid of the
Even
gang.
they're walking with the class and the teachers, they're walking into the territory of the
Yeah.
other people. Those are stories, okay?
Yeah, that's definitely, surprising. I mean, I'm fresh in New York, and it's a lot safer now, but...
Yeah.
I can imagine at the time there were interesting things going on.
Interesting things going on. So that was one junior high school story.
Yeah.
I have a lot of junior high school stories. I'll give you another one.
Sure.
Oh, this one is more fun. So my friend Inez had duty, and she had a career guidance class, and I had a career guidance class. These big ninth graders, mostly boys, who were not good in academics. Some of them were lovable, point of quotation, and some of them were pretty awful. But anyway, she was on duty, and I had a free period, so I came down the stairs, and I'm talking to her in the staircase, and all of a sudden there is one of her career guidance kids, and I had him too. Oh, Miss Zola, hello. What are you doing here? We said, why aren't you in class? He says, oh, I can't find my pass. He's giving us all these reasons. We're saying, go to class, and he doesn't want to go. Anyway, maybe we talked to him for 10 minutes, and we're standing right next to the outside door to the school, which has the kind of bar on it that you push to get out of the school, never is locked on the inside.
Yeah.
For fire reasons. And all of a sudden, he says, hold out your hands, and he gives us the bar and all the parts of the locking mechanism of the school, while these two stupid-ass white teachers were standing there talking to him. He took the door apart.
While you were talking to him? How? Why?
That's how clever he was thinking about it.
So he was clever, just not at school.
All right, so that's one story. So this is probably about early 1960s. What can we tell you? And then in that same story, they kept saying to me, you never take us any place, every other class you take. So I said, come back we had a section sheet. They had to have A's, B's, C's. If you don't get any C's or D's on the section sheet for a week, we'll plan a trip.
Okay.
So I figured I'll take them to the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Nice.
And of course, I also taught them art. I taught social studies and art in that school.
Wow.
So anyway, so I went over the idea of seeing nude pictures, how they should act, how they shouldn't act, thinking of all those possibilities of things that they might do wrong.
Yeah.
So anyway, we get on the subway, and we go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and they were actually pretty good. They brought their lunches, and we went out to the park eating their lunches, and they decided they wanted to go back through the park to get on the train on the other side of Central Park. So we went back through the park. They were jumping over rocks. I couldn't even follow them. Finally, we get to the other side, and I have a pass which says name of the school, how many kids, and you hand that in. So they're all in the subway milling around. And I tell you, every one of them was over 6 feet tall. So I'm pushing through them, and all of a sudden a cop says to me, lady, are these kids bothering you? And I said, no, they're my children. So that's my end of that story, okay? All right, now.
I'm wondering, have you like lived through any important historical events that marked you, where you were in like a certain place and you have a specific story related to that?
No, I lived through events, but I didn't really take active parts. Like today is the 50th anniversary of the March in Selma. I lived through it, but I wasn't marching down there. I'll go back further.
Sure.
The first thing I really remember was December 7th, 1941. My father had a brother who was a big shot in Chicago, and he came in, and he always stayed at the Essex Hotel on Central Park South.
Mm-hmm.
So we took the train to visit him. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon we got there, and there's no television, remember, in those days?
Yeah.
That comes after World War II. The doorman has a little radio, and as we come into the building, the radio says Pearl Harbor was attacked.
Oh.
So we go upstairs, and my father and my uncle turn on the radio, and we kids ended up spending the day sitting on the floor of his hotel room as we listened to the attack on Pearl Harbor. So I was 11 years old, December 7th, 1941.
How did that feel to an 11-year-old?
It was shocking. It was shocking. I remember before that, I used to walk through the street, and you'd see the first star, and you'd say, "Starlight, star bright, wish on the first star, wish Hitler would die," or something like that.
Oh, I don't even think you can see stars in New York anymore with all the
That
light
happened,
that's
okay.
coming.
But funny story. So my friend Claire, who I taught with at one point, she was a Spanish teacher, and so the ESL kids were mostly Japanese. This is after World War II. Japan bought the Essex House. So the first time I was in the Essex House, we were hearing about
Pearl
the
Harbor.
Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor. The next time I was in the Essex House, one of the parents of the kid that Claire was giving English lessons to was an owner of, I don't remember what the company was that owned the Essex House, but he was on the board, and he gave Claire and Sid a weekend there.
Oh.
And they invited Marty and me, my husband, to come for brunch. I always felt very weird about that.
Yeah.
The second time I'm in the Essex House, it's owned by the Japanese.
It's a strange memory.
Yeah, strange
for
memories.
sure. What you said about Pearl Harbor was really interesting, because I think people from my generation have a similar feeling about 9/11, where I know I was sitting at home watching the TV that whole day. So it sounds really similar in that aspect.
If I say to you, where were you when 9/11 happened?
Yeah, everybody knows.
Everybody knows.
At home. Where were you?
We had a house in Pennsylvania, a vacation house, and it was a Monday morning, I think. In the guest bedroom, we had a television, and I'm saying, why do they have a movie at 9 o'clock in the morning? Because I'm seeing the plane flying into the...
In the World Trade Center.
And then I suddenly, after a few minutes, realize what's happening. So I go into the bathroom. I say, "Marty, get out. You got to see this." He says, "I'm taking a shower." I said, "Marty, get out of the shower." I'm yelling at him to get out of the shower, and he's not getting out of the shower. So finally he gets out of the shower, and we sit there for the rest of the day watching it. And at that point, we realized we couldn't go back to New York at the time. And when we got back, we could see the smoke. You could also see it out the kitchen window here. You could see the smoke wafting to Brooklyn. If you look out the window, you'll see the Kosciuszko Bridge. Brooklyn is there.
That would have been like a scary
For
sight.
months.
Months, really.
For months.
Wow. That's like a dark topic. I have another topic, but it's also not as happy. Have you noticed like differences in being a woman? You were a teacher, and has that changed?
You're talking about the way women were treated?
Yeah.
I was never a person who got catcalls and whistles when I walked down the street. Sorry.
You're lucky.
Okay.
It's terrible.
But I was an assistant principal, and we're meeting 2 assistant principals, 2 males and 1 female, me and the principal, to give evaluations for the teachers for the end of the year. And there was this particular science teacher who not only stole things like fire extinguishers and other equipment from the school. The custodian was always screaming that he was taking, things that belonged to the school home.
Okay.
And Norman, who was the principal, said, "I don't want to give so-and-so a satisfactory. I want to, he was going to give him a satisfactory minus, blah, blah, blah." And
Evaluation.
And then he gets to Pilar. Pilar was what I would describe as not a fat woman, a tall woman
Okay.
big woman, but very sexy, very sexy. And she was a Spanish teacher also. And she could be sexy just the way she walked down the street. So he says, what about that cunt Pilar?
Oh boy.
And I said, Norman, you didn't call so-and-so a prig or
Yeah.
something else. Why are you calling her that? He said she's always late. Other than that, she was a really good Spanish teacher. The kids loved her. But he wanted to give her an unsatisfactory because he really was turned off by the fact that this was a very, very sexy woman who exuded sex.
So he was intimidated.
And confidence.
Yeah.
And so when I said that, he said to me, you can leave the room. You don't have to stay for this.
Oh my God. That's frustrating.
Now that is, to me, what we're talking about.
Yeah. I don't know how much things
Now,
like
he's
that.
my boss. He's the principal of the school.
Yeah.
He's not giving it to me, any harassment, but it's aimed at another woman.
And it's like, this is for the men to talk about, not for you.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know how much those things have changed. I mean,
They-
things like this probably still happen.
I'm sure they saw.
I'm
Let
seeing...
me ask you, were you ever sexually harassed or physically abused?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, in the subway, people have grabbed
I
me.
did have one subway incident, yeah.
People just grab you wherever, they don't care. Yeah, this happens. I think every woman that you would talk to has definitely had some form of harassment.
Before you go into that, going back to when I was like 14 years old, and I went to Hunter High School, and in those days the subway was 5 or 15 cents, and there were no transfers.
Wow.
So when you transferred, you had to go out and go into the next train and pay another fare.
How many lines were there?
There were 3 lines, BMT, IRT, and Independent.
Okay.
So I went to 14th Street where I changed. Very crowded. Okay, so usually it was so crowded I couldn't get past the vestibule to get into the long section. And I came home and I said to my mother, people are touching me. They're reaching, into my rear end or towards my pockets.
Yeah.
What do I do? So my mother said, take a hat pin.
Yeah.
So she gave me these long hat pins.
Oh, I love this.
And I had the hat pin in my wrist like this. Yes. And when I felt the hand touching, I jammed that.
Hey, that's a great tip. I'm going to buy a hat pin. I actually heard that people were trying to ban hat pins because men felt threatened that for once women could actually protect themselves.
The hat pin was my lifesaver going to high school.
You heard it here first.
Hands disappeared very fast.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And high school, too. Such a young age.
Yeah, I was a high school student.
Damn.
I never used the hat pin again. Oh, God, I never used the assault weapon again.
Yeah. Did you actually use it for your hat or it was just...
Yeah, we did use it for a hat. I have some here still.
Oh, I'll have to look at them later.
They're somewhere in the house. I don't know exactly where they are. I was in Italy. One time I took the ship...
You took a boat to Italy?
Yeah, way back in the 1959 or 57, one of those years. I took the Stella D'Oro to Naples. And I was supposed to come back on the Andrea Doria, which sunk.
Oh, no.
So whenever the Andrea Doria sunk, that was the year I went to Italy. So I wanted to see Sicily, because I'd been to Italy before. And I was planning to make that trip all Greek and Roman ruins. So I saw Sicily, saw all the Greek ruins, Roman ruins there. Then I came back to Rome, flew from Rome to Athens. And then I spent 3 weeks going to the Greek islands and going all the way up to Mycenae, Corinth. I went all over Greece. Anyway, I climbed the monasteries in the night because our bus broke down and we had to sleep in the monastery, which they let the people on the bus do. Okay.
No problem.
Okay, and then I came back to Athens. I really saw a lot of Greece. We came back to Athens and took a plane from Athens to Izmir.
Where's that?
Izmir, Turkey.
Okay.
And at that time, the Americans had a force in Izmir. So when I got off the plane at Izmir, I met some American soldiers. They asked me if I was a relative of someone at the base there. I said, no, I want to go to all the Greek and Turkish ruins in the area. So they met me at the hotel the next day and took me on an army jeep. There was no other way to get there. I mean, since then, more has been discovered, more has been shown, but
Yeah.
I marched all over those rooms
By yourself?
by myself, yeah, with two guys from the U.S. Army, but that was fun.
Yeah.
And then from that point, I decided to see Turkey. I went from there all the way to Ankara by local bus, stopping at Coptic sites.
How was Turkey
other-
like back in the day?
A single woman through Turkey alone is a very stupid thing to do. One time they say, "Do you have any children?" We said no. And this guy says to me, "I help you."
Ah,
So I said to my husband, the next time they ask if we have children, the answer is yes. Men looked at you, and I can't do it, but they would literally open your buttons.
like with their eyes,
With
you
their
mean?
eyes. Nobody ever pinched me in Turkey. Nobody ever touched. I say this, God's truth. But you were very uncomfortable. And you realized this was not the right thing to do. So anyway.
did it anyways.
Huh? I did it anyway. So now I'm in Ankara, and at that time the museum was very old-fashioned. I went to look at the Hittite ruins, and I meet this British woman there. And I'm telling her I'm going to go east of Ankara to go to the Alakahajak, I think it was called, and whatever the other Hittite ruins were.
Yeah.
I really liked the look of it. So at that time, I forgot what was happening. I think Turkey and Iran or Iraq were having some shooting things. I don't remember which one it was. So she said to me, this British woman,
And this was around.
"Imagine how embarrassing it will be to your government if you get shot."
Well.
But I went anyway. Look, I've been to places like Mohenjo-Daro, which is
that?
the Indus Valley civilization in India, well, actually in Pakistan. I've been to all kinds of sites in Peru. I've been to Piedras Negras. I've been to Palenque. I've been to Tikal, where I climbed the temple.
So that you
in
could
the
climb?
1950s also.
And this was just for fun or
This
as
is
part
for
of
fun
research?
because I liked archaeology.
So
Okay.
you must have had some adventures. I can imagine, especially in South America or in the jungle.
Right. My friend and Joan and I left New York the first time in the 60s, and we went by bus to Mexico. And then we saw most of the sites in Mexico. It was $64 for a bus ride to Mexico.
It's a long bus ride.
Went down to Huehuetenango, crossed the border there, and worked our way to Peru by land.
Okay. That's very
She
far.
quit in Honduras. She quit there, and I continued on myself. So
But you were walking, or you were in a car,
I
or
was walking.
you just walked to Peru?
No,
No, sorry, Panama.
I took 16 class buses. I took a dugout canoe. I took seats in a car.
How was the canoe ride?
Okay,
Okay.
yeah. The seats in the car ride was sort of uncomfortable because they really pushed you into it, and I was, well built on the sitting part. My total cost of transportation all the way to the edge of Lake Titicaca was $90
From New York
from here.
to Lake Titicaca.
Because she paid nothing. So Bolivia wouldn't give us a visa, wouldn't give visas to Americans. So I met this Dutch girl whose uncle was a priest or minister around Lake Titicaca. He took both of us across the border as Peruvian women, and we were not supposed to talk for the day. And then we went out on the lake and, walking on the sinking reeds, and you see all these people living on Lake Titicaca. Lake Titicaca was very difficult because it's 14,000 feet high.
Yeah.
And the first day, I think there were 3 steps to the hotel. And you felt yourself gasping
Because
for
of the
air
altitude.
just to walk up 3 little steps. I mean, when I'm telling you that I climbed these temples by the roots of the trees and everything, you look at me now and you say, she really did it? But I did.
I
did.
believe you. I do.
Exactly. All right.
That
so
sounds very adventurous. I'm jealous.
that was my best adventure. That was before the 60s, so I did that in part of the 50s, going from New York all the way down to the Bolivian border and into the first town on the border.
So to be clear, you went by bus and all that because flying was not an option.
It was too much money. I didn't have that kind of money.
How much would a flight have cost back then?
Well, I'll tell you that. Anyway, now I have to come back. And the idea of coming back the same way, Joan had already quit. I couldn't do it. So my sister was married. So I called her, of course, collect. And I said, I need money to get home. So turned out I took a plane from Cusco, where Machu Picchu was, Ollantaytambo, all these other sites up there. And it was an 8-day wait to get on the plane because I don't know if you know, let's say a plane comes into Machu Picchu and it weighs so much fuel, people, etc. Well, it has to weigh less going out because they have to clear the Andes. They're at a high altitude. I went down there and you got weighed along with your luggage. Everything got weighed.
Another time where you had to get weighed.
Yes.
Jeez.
And anyway, so I was stuck up there for 8 days. I got to see all kinds of sites up there, archaeological sites.
Wow.
So now I fly into Lima, and I have a plane from Lima to Miami for $150. This I remember.
And at the time, $150 was like a lot of money.
Probably. And I waited for the midnight flight from Miami to New York, which was $35.
Oh.
And I
pretty
flew
good.
into New York, didn't have the money for a cab. I called somebody to come get me. Okay, so that was that. So along the way, when I was taking the car, I met somebody, and she was a girl who spoke English coming home from school, and she invited me to a Pachamama, which was like a feast.
Okay.
They dug this pit in the earth, put a whole lamb in it, covered
Wow.
it with stones, and it cooked for God knows how many days. I do not like beer, and I don't like beer. I'll drink wine, but
That's
in those
okay.
days I didn't drink anything. So
How old were you when you were doing this trip?
27, 28, 29.
Okay, so I should be doing that now.
Huh?
I should be doing
Under
something
thir-
like
I was
that
under
now.
30. I was
Okay,
under 30. I was
okay.
in my 20s. Anyway, spear, they make chicha. I think it's called
Oh
chicha.
yeah, chicha. Or they chew.
They chew the corn.
Yeah.
They masticate the corn and spit it out, and that's what makes the beer. Okay, remember that. I'm jumping back at the beginning of that trip.
Uh-huh.
So when we got on the bus in Guatemala, and there was this famous canyon, El Tarpon or something it was called. I don't remember names from so long ago. It's like 57. You're taking the bus from Mexico City, and you're crossing at Huehuetenango, and then the bus goes so far, and then there's a suspension bridge, a rope bridge.
Oh boy.
And in those days, we wore dresses, and you carried a suitcase. There was no wheel. You had to carry your suitcase over the rope, and the side over here
You did this entire trip in a dress?
in a dress.
Oh man.
When I was in Mexico City, I went into a men's store and bought pants to go climb in the jungles because I didn't have pants. I bought khakis, and Joan did also because we knew that we weren't going to be able to climb in dresses.
Yeah.
Okay,
Back to the bridge.
Okay, so went over the bridge, and there was another bus waiting to take you on. We're in this mountainous part of Guatemala, and all of a sudden, whatever happened, the bus dies, and we all get off, and I don't know anything about automobile mechanics,
Neither do I.
but what I saw looking in there was, I don't want to know anything about automobile. There were ropes, there were strings tying things up. It was awful.
Okay. So even though you didn't know anything, you knew something was wrong.
Right. Except for Joan and I, everyone else on the bus was an Indian.
Like a native,
right.
person from South America.
People speaking Quechua or whatever the languages were, Quechua. And when they found out we couldn't speak Spanish, that we spoke English, they liked us. If we spoke Spanish, they wouldn't have liked us. So anyway, we get out, and they put rocks under the wheels of the bus. And it's a mountain road. I wouldn't call it paved. Just there is no guardrail, nothing stupid like that. Now it's daylight, and the women were all little. All the women are like up to here on us, little Guatemalan women, long braids down their back. They pulled Joan and me over, and we climbed down a little ways, and we sit with them, and they offer us cookies. And we had some cookies that we had taken with us, so we got up cookies out of the bag. We're passing those around, and then it got cold. And when we were in Mexico City for a few days, Joan wanted to buy Kahlua. Remember Kahlua?
Kahlua, the drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she bought a bottle of Kahlua, and we have our raincoats on us like we're freezing up there, the altitude. So they start passing. I would say the jug was that high, that wide.
A very big jug. That's
this
what you're showing with your
beer in
hands.
it. And they start passing it around. Everyone's drinking it, and they bring it to us, and we say, no, no, no. And they all look at us because it was warming everyone up. So Joan said, we have the Kahlua. So she goes up there, gets her suitcase, takes out the bottle. We drank a whole bottle of Kahlua that night. I did not touch Kahlua for 30 or 40 years.
I believe it.
I would not taste it. I mean, we drank the whole thing just to stay semi-warm.
Yeah. So would you now, looking back, have rather have drinking the chiche beer or
No,
still Kahlua?
I couldn't drink the beer. I don't like beer to this day.
And especially beer that's made from people chewing stuff and then spitting it back into the... it's corn, right?
It was corn.
Yeah, I
There
think
were all kinds of corn there that's very different than our corn.
Yeah, I mean, that's where corn originated in archaeology. And
I have a favorite
here, I'll
answer.
help you with that.
You got to give me a moment.
No worries.
I'll be back.
Okay. Play. So we just took a little break to look
Alright,
at some fabulous pictures of Edna back in the day, which I love the sunglasses.
Then I was going to tell you about, you see the plaque on the wall over there next to the Japanese mask?
Yeah,
Okay. When Joan and I went from New York to Lima,
on that famous
we
trip.
stopped in Guatemala City, and we went to the museum, and we saw something that looks like that in the museum. I have a book that shows pictures of the lintel in Piedras Negras, which is broken, and then Cartwright made a drawing of what it would have looked like. So somebody in Guatemala made a copy of the drawing to represent Piedras Negras. And when I asked the people at the museum about it, because I said, this doesn't exist, it faces are smashed, other certain pieces are missing.
So you saw the copy one in the museum, is what you're saying?
So the copy was in the museum. There's no original because the original is damaged. And he said they have a sculptor who makes 10 of them for the government. One is here in the museum, and the others are given as gifts by the president of Guatemala to visiting dignitaries. But he said the guy lives right outside of town. He gave us the address, so we went. And we were carrying a book of Inca art because we knew we were going on to Peru. Poor Spanish between us and him, and we told him how much we loved it. And we'd like to have it. And he said, no, he doesn't make any. He's looking at the book, and I said, here, take a look. So he's looking at the Inca art in the book, and he's very interested. And I said, please keep it. And that January, I get a knock on my door. U.S. Post is there with a package, please sign. No charge sent to me.
He sent you this replica that he usually gives to dignitaries, and that's in the museum. And now you have one.
I have one.
On your wall.
And I love it.
In exchange for that book.
Yeah.
Oh,
The best thing I ever got.
I'm going to put a picture of that next to all the other pictures so people who can hear about it can also see it.
So, and then when I bought the mask, there's one over there with a tooth, a white tooth sticking out. That one and this one I bought in the same country. Many years ago on a Halloween, I put that mask on. And I opened the door to little princesses, and they screamed and ran. So that's the only one I ever wore.
Okay, I have just some questions to close up.
Right.
I wonder if you have any advice for my generation. I know that's like a old and tired question, but
Well,
I know I have to keep a hat pin with me in the subway.
no, I would say that they say, I don't want to think politics. What certain people are doing now, political science major, I didn't tell you that. I'm upset, and you should vote.
So your advice is just vote.
To vote, and
I think that's good
to
advice.
be global minded. I mean, to me, climate and all the rest of it is very important. I'll be 110 years from now.
Congratulations.
Oh, yeah, I won't make it. I don't
We're still
expect,
talking.
I don't expect to be around after 100. I don't even expect to be around at 92.
So we have to pay
And
attention.
this is the sort of things we have to look at.
Yeah.
That a piece of Antarctica the size of Florida had broken off and
Yeah.
was melting.
Yeah.
Think about how much water that is.
Yeah, it's what a lot of young people are concerned about right now.
And then I get very upset about things like the burning of the Brazilian forests.
Yeah, and
because
Australia.
the rainforest is the longest. I mean, I can't talk climate to people your age. They don't believe it.
Oh, we do. I mean, it's very, very concerning. Actually, a lot of people are just depressed about it because what can we do? It's hard to change such a big thing.
Never mind, huh?
I think the point you're trying to get across is we need to work together to try and avoid climate change or make an effort at least together.
And you can't close your ears and say, I'm not interested in that. Oh, I don't care. I'm fine. The stock market is good for me.
All right. Shall we have dinner?
Yes, we'll have
Thank
dinner.
you so much,
We'll have
Edna.
dinner without ever knowing about how many children I had in Afghanistan.
If you like that and you want to hear more, episodes launch at the beginning of each month. You can follow the podcast at Stories Your Granny Never Told on social media to get more updates about episode launches. We are at storiesyourgrannynevertold.com, at gmail.com, and we're also on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you aren't technologically minded, you can also leave a voicemail if you'd like to be an interviewee, or if you have a granny who has a story that she might not have told you. Our voicemail is at 332-203-2059. The background music is the Maple Leaf Rag from the New Orleans Rhythm Kings. Keep that inner granny alive, knit me a scarf, feed your cats a little bit too much, and yell at some pigeons. Bye!